Southern Fried Books, 29 Jackson Street, Newton, downtown Newton's only independent bookstore. And they offer a wide selection of bestsellers, award-winning books with adult, children's, and special interest titles to suit your fancy. Many of Hometown Novel Night authors have their books available in Southern Fried Books' local author section. Hometown Novel Nights, bringing local authors and local audience together south of Atlanta. In fact, this Thursday night at the Carnegie at 6:30 p.m., 3 great new authors. But let's not get ahead of ourselves this morning. We will share more details in just a few moments. But first, his friends and family know him as Mike. However, he also goes by T.M. Brown, an award-winning local Southern author who proudly calls Coweta County his home.
Key listeners this morning, isn't it wonderful to wake up this morning and actually know that fall is finally knocking on the door, and maybe we might be saying so long to summer for at least until next summer. So glad to be here in Coweta County in downtown Newton this morning with a very special guest today with me, who I'm going to kind of leave sitting over there in the quiet for a few minutes before I introduce him, because he's a good friend of mine. And kind of first thing I'd like to talk about this morning, just to kind of give the listeners a little bit of update on what's going on in Hometown Novel Night world, where we're getting local authors a chance to be in front of a growing local audience. At the Carnegie Library, and also being connected up with Southern Fried Books, the new bookstore here in Newton at 29 Jackson Street, just 2 blocks away from where I'm broadcasting this morning on Historic Court Square. Last month, right after we had the radio broadcast, we brought 4 authors together down at Rogers Barbecue in Hogansville. And we had Melba Moon, who also goes by M.J. Flournoy in all of her romantic novels, and Mary Marvella, who is M.M. Mayfield in hers. And then we had Ann Rhodes, a wonderful teacher out of Hogansville who now has got 3 books of poetry out, was there sharing with the folks that were at the barbecue place in the banquet hall there. And then we had a new face, Chelly Woodham Phillips. What a wonderful young lady that's from Moreland, and looking forward to seeing more of her in the upcoming months and events as well. So we had a great turnout, and Hometown Novel Nights is continuing to experience a growing audience each and every month. And we're about to, as you possibly heard at the intro, just this Thursday night at 6:30, just down the street here on Historic Court Square at the Carnegie Library, upstairs in the auditorium, we've got 3 more great authors lined up. But before I kind of give you a sneak peek on that, kind of would like to talk about also a new association that Hometown Novel Nights has been allowed to get involved with, and that's the Artisans Heritage Guild here in Coweta County, and it's headed by Michael Seebacher and a host of some very talented and gifted artisans in this area who are looking to be raising awareness with ultimately funds to start a school for young people to be engaged in things like blacksmithing and ceramics and woodwork and the whole array of what it is to get your hands dirty, again. And I guess we qualify because, as we joke, we're referred to as the wordsmiths in the group in formulating stories and telling stories. There's an event coming up at the end of this month on October 26th that'll be at the First Avenue Park from 4 o'clock in the afternoon until 9 o'clock at night, where we're going to be doing some fun games. Michael is arranging for a trebuchet, and those that don't know what that is, that's nothing more than a fancy slingshot, basically, that's going to launch pumpkins into the air for all of the fans. But we're also going to be doing storytelling and some other fundraising activities in that fun evening. So there'll be more messages out on that, and hope that y'all will can come out and visit with us and enjoy all of these wonderful gifted people out there. Also, I would tell you that this past month, Southern Fried Books, I happened to be at and was able to be standing in Southern Fried Books during the Fall Art Walk and also Oktoberfest last Friday. And the endless flow of people walking into the bookstore was fabulous, and I saw the smiles on Allison and Steve's face as they came in. And many of them had not been there before. So again, I want you to pass the word, Southern Fried Books. 2 blocks off of Court Square on Jackson Street. Right next to Christie's Restaurant is a fabulous new bookstore that you've got to come see. He's adding new bookshelves because of his growing inventory that is available as well. Something new I'd like to add this month and each month is a book of a month. There's so many out there, it's always hard to pick one. But this month I definitely had an easy selection. The book is called Watch What You Say. It's by George Weinstein. It's officially releasing November 5th, and it's actually published by SFK Press here in Newnan, Georgia. They've been putting out some wonderful books over the last 2 years, and George's book, Watch What You Say, is the 5th or 6th novel in George's repertoire, but it's the best he's done. It has received awards from the Southern Independent Booksellers Alliance, and it basically, with a real simple synopsis here, it talks about what lengths will a woman go to save her family. A web radio personality, Bo Riccardi, is pushed beyond her mental and physical limits when her husband, Oscar, is kidnapped by a man from her dark past. The abductor commands her to interview him live on her show with the author's life on the line. And the story gets more curious and more curious as you turn every page. It is one of those page turners that only someone like George Weinstein can write. Coincidentally, George is also not only a good friend of mine, but he's the president of the Atlanta Writers Club in Atlanta. And there's an awful lot that's going on with Atlanta Writers Club, which I always encourage a lot of my author friends to get in touch with and to be a part of. And George will be visiting with us at various Hometown Novel Night events in the upcoming months as well. I'd also like to say, now I'm going to take a moment just before I introduce my special guest, to talk about 2 upcoming events right now. One is the Thursday night at the Newnan Carnegie again, on the auditorium on the 2nd floor, beginning at 6:30, and it lasts until about 8:30. We've got 3 award-winning authors lined up, and I'm just tickled to death about this lineup. Roger Johns, he has 2 books out. It's called Dark River Rising and River of Secrets. His Wallace Hartman detective series is not about the typical male detective out there beating the streets. This is a gritty young female detective who doesn't know the word no. And it has a Louisiana flair to his storyline. Kim Osborne is the second author, and she's local. She's from Sonoya. A lot of the young people know of her books already. She's got the World of Abraxas series of books, and she's known for her Bigfoot CSI series of books. Kim Osborne's going to be with us as well. And then we're going to have, coming up from Barnesville, Georgia, Miss D.K. Marley. Now, she writes Shakespearean-era historical history novels. Her recent release, just came out this summer, is The Fire of Winter. And I think you'll find that to be, if you're into that historical, you like that the castles and kings and courtyard drama, this is the kind of author that you want to be meeting and talking with. I've known her now since earlier this year, and she's been a part of what we've been doing for a while, and I'm just glad that she's able to be up here. There's also a new announcement I want to make, is we have a new venue for Hometown Novel Nights that begins at the end of this month. And in every 4th Sunday going forward, the Monarch House. It is a assisted living senior residence center extraordinaire located on Bullsboro Drive. And it is a facility that I can only explain by you being there, to see a residence for seniors that just need a little extra care, but they love to be engaged. And to be invited to bring a couple of authors every month to sit with them, to talk about the books, to meet with them, their family, and guests every Sunday from 2 o'clock until 3:30 on the 4th Sunday of every month is going to be a lot of fun. If you'd like to know more, please go check out our webpage, and we'll be talking more about the specifics on that coming up. We've also got something going on that we are, and I was just talking with my special guest this morning about this. This Hometown Novel Night experience has been just blossoming. And I always got nervous that we would never have enough authors. We are now booked through the month of June with events, multiple events every month. And I'm just tickled to death because it makes my job a lot easier. And for the help that I got with Scott Ludwig and Angie Gallion helping me along the way, this is a program that I'm just tickled about. So I really do want to thank everybody, this whole listening audience. I hope that you'll come out Thursday night and be a part of what we're doing and visit us online. But at this time, I've got a special guest. Now, Tim Riordan, it happens to be the pastor of Sunrise Baptist Church right here in Newnan. But he also, when he decides to change out of his pastor uniform, he's also a phenomenal fiction writer as well. He does a lot of pastoral books, nonfiction, under his name of Tim Riordan, but he does his fiction work under the pseudonym Judah Knight. So he's like Superman. He goes into the telephone booth and he swaps out and puts on his Judah Knight outfit when he starts writing his Davenport series. And I think, Tim, you said you're up to book 6?
That's right.
Book 6. And Tim's been a very good friend of mine. So what I'd like to do, first of all, is let me just say this. Good morning, Tim, and how are you this morning?
I'm doing great, Mike. Thanks for having me on today.
Well, what a lot of folks need to understand is Hometown Novel Nights probably would not be what it is today had it not been for Tim's willingness to walk with me into a venue in Sonoya 2 years ago this month.
It's hard to believe it's been that long.
Yeah, we went to the Sonoya Coffee and Cafe right there in downtown Sonoya, looked out onto the Walking Dead set behind us as we were talking that night, and I was hoping that we'd see, I don't know, 10 or 12 people, our close family members and friends show up. And how did it turn out?
It's probably, 25, 30 people.
Yeah, we kind of filled the place. It was really awesome. I mean, and it made me say, you know what? I think this might work. And it was the premise behind what got us started. So I'm really pleased that Tim is here. There's been many times in my writing, journey that I've gone and sat with Tim and kind of picked his brain a little bit from time to time because I know he's written a few books along the way and can offer a lot of help. So, answer me this, Tim. Tell us a little bit about your background as a pastor and how you got into writing as Judah Knight.
Well, Mike, actually, when I was a kid, I made a list of 100 things I wanted to do in my life, and one of those things on that list was to write 10 books. I was about 18 when I made that list. I got busy with life, college, got married, I've got 6 children, coached Little League Baseball, pastoring a church, seminary, ended up with a master's from Southwestern Seminary and doctorate out of New Orleans. It was just a busy time, and so I never seemed to have time to write. And it wasn't until I was in my 40s that I began to realize that instead of thinking about writing books, I need to think about writing paragraphs. And so I began the discipline of setting aside an hour a day to write. And then eventually I came out with my first book. My first book, actually, I was working with some publishers on, and while I was waiting on them to do their thing, I published a book just for my congregation on Psalms. And I decided to create my own publishing company for that one and not wait around on a publisher to go through those processes. And that book, actually, I wrote it for my congregation, and it began to sell in other places. And I began to realize a great market for Christian living and spiritual growth really around the world. And I didn't have to wait around on a publisher to do it. And so through my own publishing company, I did that. And while I was doing that, I guess I need to back up. When I first came to Newnan, I commuted for about 45 minutes, and until we finally moved to town. I lived in Griffin, right?
Yeah.
So I drove back and forth while I was waiting on my son to graduate from high school. So during that time, I started trying to listen to books on CD, and I had a very hard time concentrating on nonfiction books, which is typically my genre. And I started listening to historical fiction. and I loved it. I fell in love with historical fiction because it was just fun. It was enjoyable. I love history. And so I would listen to that. So one day at lunch, this would have been about 2009, I began wondering if I could write a novel. And so just for fun, I would take my lunch hour and just play around with a story, not ever intending to publish it, but just for fun. And so it sort of became this long story that never ended. And so over the next 3 years, it was just at lunchtime I would play around with this story. My daughter, in the meantime, wanted to go to Cambodia on a mission trip, and she needed to raise some funds. And so I told her, I had these nonfiction books, but they weren't really ready. I'm still working with a publisher on one of them, Immovable, Standing Firm in the Last Days. I was trying to get that one out. And so I said, well, I've got this story, maybe I could tweak it, make it something that people would want to actually buy and use it to help you fund your mission trip. And so I began thinking then about what do I need to change in this story to make it something that's, would be marketable. And I decided that probably the most popular genre would be something in the romance area, which I've never even read a romance book at that book. So at that point, so I decided to read a Christian romance and wonder if I could tweak my action-adventure kind of story and add some romance to it and make it enjoyable book. And so I read this one book, and I didn't like it at all. It was a little hokey. It was a little embarrassing. So then I thought, well, I'm going to read a popular secular author in romance, and I got it from the library. I thought that would be safe. Little did I know, it wasn't safe at all. It was horrible. I couldn't even finish reading it because it was so bad. And so that gave me an idea of trying to write wholesome romance, action, adventure for a secular audience using biblical principles on relationships. What I want to do is help people experience the kind of relationship they've always wanted to have.
Good.
And to have an adventure that maybe they've only experienced in their dreams. And so I began writing these books for secular marketing it that way. I did not market it as a Christian book. Because of that, I decided not to use my real name. I thought, if somebody, who would want to read a romance action adventure from a pastor if they're not a Christian? They might think, I don't want to read that. And
so how did you come up with Judah Knight?
Well, I was with my kids, and we were just talking about this book. I've got this book. I want to publish it, and I don't want to use my real name. I need to come up with something. And my son, who is a Christian recording artist, he said, Dad, I've always loved the name Judah. So Judah came from my son, Timothy. And so he helped me with that. And then I had to, of course, think of a last name. And we have Knight Street out near my house. I pass it every day. So I thought, Judah Knight, why not? So that's how I came up with that. It was really nothing.
So it's a very
special.
simple, serendipitous, name creation and not anything deep.
I really didn't process anything about it. I just had to come up with a name, and so.
Well, that's awesome.
So I did that.
There's a funny story that I will share very, very briefly, because at our event in Sonoya, I had not been introduced to Judah Knight yet. I knew Tim, and there was a bunch of books sitting on the counter by the cash register where we arranged to sell books. And the owner of Brent Anderson at Sonoya said, well, who's this Judah Knight? Well, I said, I don't know. Hold on a minute. I went to the microphone and I said, Judah Knight, would Judah Knight please come up? And Tim looked up at me and he goes, hey. So that's how I got introduced to Judah Knight. So that was kind of embarrassing because I didn't even know that about you at the time, but I do now. How can folks get to your books?
Well, you can get them through any retailer. Amazon is probably the most popular. Now, some of my books, the digital versions are only for sale on Amazon. Some of them are, like my nonfiction books, you can get through other places as well. But if you go to for my fiction, JudahKnight.com, which Knight is with a K, K-N-I-G-H-T. So JudahKnight.com will have all my fiction stuff. Good. And you can see all of that. My nonfiction books, which I have a book on Psalms and Proverbs, and this Immovable, Standing Firm in the Last Days is really about spiritual warfare and has some Bible prophecy stuff in there. And you can go to my website, timriordan.com, and it will have information on all of those. The Judah Knight books are, I call them romantic suspense. I'm a scuba diver, so they're scuba diving, treasure hunting, bad guys. But by the time you get to book 3 in this series, I introduce some spiritual themes about grace and forgiveness. One of my main characters is dealing with some real struggles with her family. She hates her parents. They've had just a horrible influence on her life. But she sees something in her aunt and her uncle that she wants. Anyway, so I unpack some spiritual themes, but you can find out about all of that on my website.
So Tim Riordan, RIORDAN.com,
right,
or Judah Knight, JUDAHKNIGHT.com.
Right.
So there's a good place to start to find them. Or walk into Southern Fried Books and ask for
They can order it, sure.
They can order it as well. And so that's awesome. Well, Tim, let me ask you, let's get off of our selfish, self-serving perspectives a moment. Tell me a little about what you would consider to be your favorite books, looking on both sides of that fence.
Yeah. I've been greatly influenced by C.S. Lewis.
Mm-hmm.
Probably, in my opinion, one of the greatest writers, certainly of the 20th century.
Mm-hmm.
If I were to make a list of 10 books everybody ought to read, his book, Mere Christianity, probably would need to go on that. I love A.W. Tozer and J.I. Packer. J.I. Packer's Knowing God was a huge influence on my life. Timothy Keller. I love Prodigal God. It's very difficult for me to say what's my favorite book, but certainly Prodigal God is excellent. But I tell you, a book that also greatly influenced me is Stephen Covey's book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Mm-hmm. To be organized and goal-driven and all those things is very important, and that book was huge, helping me with that. When I was a kid, we used to sit around talking about what books we're going to read for the next year. And it was then, as a probably 17-year-old, I began developing the idea of creating a plan for growth for the coming year. And so I make a list of books every year up front that I'm going to read for the coming year. And probably back then, Richard Foster's book on spiritual disciplines greatly influenced my life as a young kid. I was probably 18, 19 when I read that. Now, on the fiction side, I recently met Lynn Blackburn. I like her books. I connected with her through scuba diving. She's got a series out on that, and so that I think interested both of us as we talked together about that. And she writes in my genre of romantic suspense. My wife and I are reading Francine Rivers' The Last Sin Eater, which is excellent. I've enjoyed Francine Rivers' books. And then I love... it's kind of a variety of different genres. I don't just read in my field, but Joel C. Rosenberg probably is one of my favorite suspense thriller authors. The 12th Imam, that series, I love that. J.R.R. Tolkien.
Oh, well, yeah.
I mean, how do you beat that? I love his Lord of the Rings program. So it's very difficult to say what's my favorite and what books had the greatest influence. Obviously, the Bible, I would say. But beyond that, there's just a lot of
It's funny,
awesome
that happens
authors.
to be the one book that seems to be showing up every show. So when I asked that. And I guess that's still a good thing because it's not going out of print either because of that. So that's awesome. What would you, and I know this is hard because as a pastor there's so many books that shape who we are. And I remember that laundry list at seminary myself years ago. But is there one particular book outside the Bible that shaped your who you are today more than any other?
Well, as far as shaping who I am today, I probably would have to go back to Richard Foster's book, Celebration of Discipline. I can't say it's my favorite book, but I would say that back then when I read that, I was a young pastor. I started preaching when I was 14, so I've been doing this quite a while. And I went on staff at a church when I was 17. Our pastor left. I immediately became pastor, and I'm just a kid trying to pastor this church. And I remember sitting in my office on that first day thinking, I'm way over my head. I don't know what I'm doing. And I knew that I needed to be a reader. Leaders are readers. I'd always heard that. And so, and now authors are readers, so you got to read all the time. And so I joined a book club. And I think I was 18, and the first book I got was Celebration of Discipline. And I got to tell you that to understand the value and the process of spiritual disciplines in your life, it affects everything. Matter of fact, it affects discipline in your life. And so I think that book shaped me and helped me grasp the importance of personal discipline. And, of course, through that, I was challenged in the area of Bible reading and prayer and devotion and fasting and worship and just a lot of other things. And so I got to say Probably that book. Now, I'll tell you, I love John Ortberg, and he's written a book called The Life You've Always Wanted. It, too, is on spiritual disciplines, and I kind of felt like, in comparing those two books, his book was like spiritual disciplines for the rest of us. You know, Richard Foster is sometimes a little overwhelming, like, I got to be up at 4 a.m. praying every day, you know, whereas John Ortberg was, he kind of put spiritual disciplines into a little more practical, expression.
Yeah.
And so I love that book. I think it's it could be life-changing.
I've got both of those on my bookshelf.
Yeah, they're excellent. Yeah, they've made a big difference in my life.
Well, that's fantastic. But Tim, I'll tell you, to have you here and what you represent, to this community, I could only encourage folks, if you haven't met Pastor Tim Riordan, and I'll properly refer to him as Dr. Tim Riordan.
Tim's fine.
Tim's fine. He is one of those wonderful. He's like my character in my book, which Tim knows what I'm talking about. That kind of shuns all of the accolades that are on the wall and the accomplishments. He's just a good pastor friend, and it's the kind that you want in your life to have around. Tim and I can talk about different things, just like I would want any pastor to be. And I really thank you for being here today, Tim, and look forward to having you as part of the Hometown Novel Night events coming up. I hope that our audience will go to our websites and you'll see the list. There's going to be more and more of the ongoing listing of all the authors at all the events that'll be on our webpage that I hope that you guys will go to, and you'll see where Tim is going to be represented on that, and a lot of other authors from this local area. If you'd like to know more about some of the upcoming monthly panels, what I suggest you do, those that are on Facebook, if you'll go to @WGA Hometown Novel Nights on Facebook. You can also go to tmbrownauthor.com, and I've got a Hometown Novel Night tab there that will link you with all that information as well. And we also have an Instagram. Boy, we're really getting out there technologically, and I am very thankful to Angie, by the way. It's called @Hometown Novel Night. We'll get you into our Instagram feed as well. All of the events at the Carnegie, all of our events are free. There are some events at the Carnegie that we do ask you to reserve a seat, just so we can kind of get a head count expectation, because we've been running anywhere from 30 to 40 people in the last few events. So it helps us to set out the chairs, so we're not constantly pulling more chairs out when y'all come upstairs. Remember, you got Thursday night at the Carnegie upstairs in the auditorium. There's an elevator that you can use if you need that extra advantage, or there's the stairwell at the front of the building when you come up. And come on upstairs and meet Roger Johns, Kim Osborne Sullivan, and D.K. Marley, and yours truly will be moderating that night. Southern Fried Books, our sponsor and partner with all that we do at Hometown Novel Nights, will be there selling books of all of our authors that will be talking that night. So you have an opportunity to walk away with signed books from some of your favorite new authors. And I look forward to all of y'all participating in what we're doing every month here on WQEE, Rock the Key Audience. We thank you so much for that opportunity, and a special shout out I certainly want to give out to Southern Fried Books for being our sponsor for this program, Corner Arts Gallery for supporting the local authors in this area, obviously the Carnegie Library Program, which has got a lot of wonderful things happening as well, and certainly my friend Ryan here at WQEE. Tim, thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Mike.
For those who would like to find out more about the future schedule of Hometown Novel Night events, visit Hometown Novel Nights on Facebook, or visit Mike's author page at tmbrownauthor.com. And there is a page dedicated to Hometown Novel Nights there as well. You can also visit at Southern Fried Books on Facebook, or better yet, stop in and visit their store at 29 Jackson Street in downtown Newnan. This has been the Hometown Novel Nights radio show, hosted by T.M. Brown. See you next time.